what a cheating snake.
Then they're just driving in silence as Here I Go Again by Whitesnake's playing on the speakers. So eventually they turn that off and they take some calls from live stream viewers. And it goes exactly how you'd expect.
Where's your chin, dude? Where did it go? You look like an adult baby.
And so that goes on for a while, with Elisa saying how she posted Sarah's phone number, home address, full name, and Venmo account on a Discord server. And then just adding fuel to the fire, they get Sarah back on the phone. With then, and here's the big thing, I can't show this in today's show, but at different points, Elisa starts punching and slapping Scoro in the face and body. And after one strike that he claims nearly broke his nose, he says,
"Next time you touch me, I'll deck you." You understand?
But then she tries to hit him again, and so he yanks her by the hair, commanding her to pull over, repeatedly calling her a dumb C-word while she screams and blares the horn, calling for help. And then with one fistful of her hair still in his grip, he pushes her out of the car. But then, apparently someone called the police because according to TMZ, officers then showed up, watched the video, and decided Elisa was the aggressor, with them arresting her for simple domestic battery and giving us this very unhappy mugshot, with her afterward telling the outlet that she was sorry for her actions and said that it was a moment that she's not proud of. You know, the law is one thing, those cops' judgment is another, and your opinion on this is something else. And so with everything you've seen and heard, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? And then in entertainment drama news, Rihanna has found herself in the midst of a controversy. Also, when I say found herself, I mean, I imagine this was all intentional, because she just did a photo shoot with Interview magazine where she dressed as a sexy nun with bold makeup on. She also posted a video really playing up the sexualization aspect there, with seeming to reference this Pew Boy poster art. And so with that, you know, obviously you had her fans saying she ate, she slayed, she served, she left no crumbs. But this, as you also had a lot of other people calling the photos a mockery of Christianity, saying that it's blatantly disrespectful of the religion, people writing things like, we as Christians need to get serious and boycott this type of nonsense, and don't you guys get tired of making excuses for disrespecting religious garments, or is it only allowed when it's tied to Christianity? Or with a lot of people saying, hey, why don't you do something for Muslims next? So I'm also noting that apparently there's been some discourse already online about sexualizing nuns being kind of in lately. So with this Rihanna cover, you had some people saying things like, y'all, I don't want to stir the shit pot too much, but we have to stop sexualizing groups of people whose whole purpose in life is to not be sexualized. But some also bring in the mothers shouldn't do sexy things outrage into the pylon. You know, what was interesting, and it seems often the case these days, depending on where you went online, it was just like drastically different reactions, people in different echo chambers, because you'd go one place online and people were outraged, other places online they're like, shut up, saying things like, I'm sorry, but you bitches been sexy nuns every Halloween since 2004 and Rihanna is where y'all draw the line at? Lord Jesus, please cover your ears when these people speak their hypocrisy. Right? And people also noting that art and media taking provocative jabs at the Catholic Church is not a new thing. But with this little messy mess, I gotta ask you, where do you land on this? What are your thoughts here? And then, y'all, we've got Boeing back in the news, and I love how I found out about this news. This morning, ass crack at dawn, I look at a text from a buddy, and they're like, did you see the new Boeing drama? And I was like, Boeing drama? Did Boeing just get in the Kendrick Lamar Drake beef? What happened? And then I looked into it, and I saw that the Boeing drama was that a Boeing whistleblower who was an engineer who spent 10 years at the company and who worked on the 787 Dreamliner, right, Sam Salapur, he says that Boeing failed to follow its own procedures for ensuring pieces of the plane's fuselages were properly fitted and fastened together, with then the results of that being that the planes could just break apart mid-flight after thousands of trips, which, yeah, I guess would be dramatic. Some might even describe it as a bit much. And, you know, I should also say with this that the 787, that's actually the first airliner that makes heavy use of so-called composite materials rather than just straight up metal. And so because of that, it's normal that we have questions about how these materials will hold up to the long-term stresses of flight. But notably, and as mentioned before, Salapur's allegations have to do specifically with Boeing's conduct, with him saying that the company took shortcuts to meet production targets and describing cases where workers placed excessive stress on major airplane joints to make it look like parts fit together properly, which he says is a problem because that could cause deformation of the material and eventually lead to its earlier than expected failure. And on top of all that, he says that he's faced retaliation after raising his concerns with the company. And that retaliation including being threatened with physical violence from a supervisor. And then ultimately, he says that after being ignored and left out of key meetings, he was involuntarily reassigned to work on the company's 777 aircraft program, where very notably, he says, again, he saw workers forcing misaligned parts to fit together and even jumping on parts to make them fit together. Because apparently we are building planes the same way I have to try and pack my wife's suitcase. You know, it was only after all this that Salapur took his concerns to the FAA, with a spokesman for the agency confirming that it was investigating the allegations, but not providing further comment. But with this, Boeing, for their part, they've of course denied all wrongdoing, saying in a statement that it has full confidence in the 787 Dreamliner Dreamliner that Salapor's claims are inaccurate, and also saying that the planes have been subject to rigorous engineering examination under FAA oversight. And to that point, Boeing also said that it identified concerns about the proper fitting and joining of fuselages back in 2020, with the FAA approving a fix in 2022 that allowed the company to continue production after stopping for nearly 2 years. But, and this could be a big thing, according to spokesperson Paul Lewis, the company could only determine that there was no immediate safety issue, with him adding that the analysis to determine if there may be a long-term fatigue concern, that's ongoing, saying they weren't rushing the team because it wouldn't be an issue for, quote, many years to come. We're gonna have to wait to see what comes from this, because obviously this is not the first time we talked about Boeing troubles. It had doors popping off mid-flight, Department of Justice launching a criminal investigation. There was also that other Boeing whistleblower, John Barnett, who had raised concerns about manufacturing practices, who was then later found dead after reportedly taking his own life. There's also recently that engine cover that fell off and struck the wing flap. And so all of this is why Congress is getting involved, with the Senate Subcommittee on Investigation set to hold a hearing with Salapor next week. And with that, Senator Richard Blumenthal, who chairs that subcommittee, pointing to the, quote, repeated shocking allegations about Boeing's manufacturing failing, and saying that he wants the public to hear from the engineer firsthand.
Boeing is putting profits and production speed ahead of quality and safety.
And then, so for my fellow meat lovers out there looking to save time in the kitchen, the fantastic sponsor of today's show, Just Meats, has a delicious time saver for my household. I'm talking premium grass-fed beef with no artificial colors or flavored, pre-seasoned and pre-cooked, delivered to your door. You can feed yourself and your family in minutes. And it's also super easy for us because we only have to add the sides. The main meal is ready in mere minutes. I started with what they call the most popular meat box, which is a variety of meats like smoked Texas brisket, Hawaiian teriyaki chicken, pulled pork, and more. You can really mix up your menu for the week. Also, I will say the brisket is currently my favorite, but what's really cool about Just Meats is that items like their new roasted diced chicken or the ground chuck, they're perfect for topping off nachos, right? These proteins, right, they elevate your favorite snack into a meal. Plus, Just Meats practices safe sourcing of meat from local ranches in the Rocky Mountain region, ensuring humane treatment and feeding of animals and maintaining optimal temperatures through their carefully insulated method of shipping. So if you're hungry for some goodness, just go click that link in the description and use code DeFranco to get $15 off your first purchase. And by the way, that deal is stackable with other deals on the site. And then, if I told you that Kraft's Lunchables wasn't exactly the healthiest thing in the world, you'd be like, oh, cool, thank you for the breaking news, Phil. But unfortunately enough, there is actually breaking news around how bad Lunchables are. And I don't just mean with the extremely high levels of sodium it has. Instead, according to research by Consumer Reports, there's a good amount of lead and cadmium in there, both of which cause long-term problems that have a tendency to build up in the body after repeated exposure, which could be the case if you were eating something, let's say, as a daily lunch replacement. And that's even more true for children because, they're smaller and they need less of an exposure to start seeing problems. And it turns out, we're not talking about some lead and cadmium. It's a weirdly large amount for how small a Lunchable is, right? A single 3.2 ounce turkey and cheddar cracker Lunchable, those have 74% of California's level of allowed lead for a child 4 to 8 years old. And while yes, that is technically the daily allowance, that is just one thing they are eating in a whole day, leaving very little room if they're getting exposed to the stuff in another way. And again, this is in addition to the things that everyone's known about, like the sodium, which once again, just a single Lunchable has 49% of your daily recommended intake, which is just extreme numbers for something that makes up just 15% of a child's recommended daily caloric intake. So if a child gets more than half of the daily limit for lead from so few calories, there's little room for potential exposures from other foods, drinking water, or the environment. And on top of that, you had researchers warning that some of the foods that are common in Lunchables, such as many ultra-processed meats, have links to cancers, which led them to warn that we don't think anybody should regularly eat these products, and they definitely shouldn't be considered a healthy school lunch. But with all this, on the other side, as you'd expect, Kraft's out there fighting for their Lunchables, with them saying, among other things, they have issues with how things are being presented, saying many of our Lunchables products are a good source of protein, offering nutrients through meats and cheeses. We've taken great steps to improve the nutrition profile of Lunchables, including recently unveiling Lunchables with fresh fruit and reducing the sodium in all Lunchables crackers by 26%. With them also going on to argue that just because something is labeled as ultra-processed doesn't mean it is inherently worse. With part of their argument being that they add extra nutrients to it and thus it's actually better overall for the consumer. And then going on to add, the classification of food should be based on scientific evidence that includes an assessment of the nutritional value of the whole product, not restricted to one element such as a single ingredient or the level of processing. There's also concerns about the sample size, where they only tested 12 store-bought Lunchables, which is enough to see a pattern, but it's also a pretty small sample size. But with that said, it hasn't stopped the researchers from starting a petition with 12,000 signatures so far to remove the products from the National School Lunch Program. And then, we gotta talk about Arizona. It's a state that'll always have a special place in my heart. It's where I proposed to my wife. It's a state that I think is largely filled with fantastic people, which is kind of amazing. If I lived in a place where the sun was actively trying to murder me most of the year, I'd probably be in more of a shitty mood. But the big news that we've got to talk about with Arizona is that they have learned how to time travel.
Great Scott.
I know, this is heavy.
At least legislatively. Because yesterday, Arizona reinstated an abortion law that was first created 50 years before Arizona was even a state. From a time before women could vote, and even the prospect of the 3/5 compromise for a lot of people was maybe a little bit too much. But that's also because the Civil War was actively playing out. But then after the law got reinstated, a lot of stuff happened. So let's break it down. Because everything first kicked off yesterday when the Arizona Supreme Court, which is composed entirely of